So regarding the Zimbabwe's economic problem, I'll go back to the same principles that I always talk about. The problem is not that Zimbabwe has got serious problems that have persisted for the last 25 years. It's not the first country that has faced serious economic challenges. If you do a history of economics, you study the history of economics, you know that America once had a very serious economic depression in the 1920s. And it emerged from that depression to become the most powerful economy in the world. You know, South Korea, it was at one time it was a donor-dependent country like Zimbabwe, but it was able to transform its economy to becoming a donor country. And we, at some point, I attended a certain conference where the then ambassador of South Korea to Zimbabwe made a presentation. And he gave us a story about how South Korea turned around its fortunes from being a donor-dependent country to a donor-dependent economy. You know, Germany also went through a very depression where with a massive inflation, but it was able to come back. So the whole thing about Zimbabwe's situation is not about the fact that it has problems. The problem that we are having is when failing to focus our energy and concentration of coming up with effective strategic solutions that can then take the country out of this particular economic situation. And it's not impossible in terms of mathematical or in terms of thinking or strategically. It's possible, but the problem is if we're not committed to turning it around, and if we are operating in the way that in which we are operating. I talk about the 8 pillars that we need to focus on. The first one is leadership, economic leadership. The second one is entrepreneurship. The third one is management. The fourth one is organization. Being organized as an economy around the economic challenges that we are facing. Right now, we are not organized as an economy. We're in 6s and 7s. There's no organization solving the problems. And then we are talking about numeric thinking, mathematical thinking, thinking in terms of numbers. Numbers. So if you are talking about creating 2 million jobs in 5 years, we're talking about numbers there. So we must find a formula, a mathematical formula that can make us create those 2 million jobs. I've got a formula that I generated, that I created, of creating jobs with the specific things that can be done. But it's a mathematical formula, but no one is interested in listening to this solution. Anything that has got numbers can be solved by using mathematical equations. And then the other one is strategy. As we speak now, I think the concept and the idea of what strategy is still confusing so many people, but it's not a problem with Zimbabwe alone. All over the world, many people are still confused about the term strategy. And what we are calling strategy in our companies, organizations, businesses, economies, and society is not real strategy. You can check with other people who are also working in the same area of strategy, like Professor Michael Porter, Richard Rumelt, talk about Gary Hamel, Parahalad, C.K. Parahalad, talk about Dudley Lynch, talk about Paul Codis, talk about Dr. Tony Grandi, talked about Henry Mintzberg. All these people, they are still complaining. They are calling to the world that we need to review our theory of strategy so that we begin to use real strategy. If we think we have a strategy when we don't have a strategy, we are not doing anything. We won't solve the problem by thinking that we have a strategy when we don't have a strategy, or what we are thinking is a strategy is not a strategy at all. And then the last one is systems thinking. The economy is a system. It's a system. It's a system. So you cannot solve a system problem without using systems thinking. It's impossible. And talking about thinking, systems thinking, is thinking that is more important than knowing. We need to think. We need to think think away or out of the problems that we have now, the economy. We cannot come out of this economy by knowing. We can only come out of this situation by thinking. We think out of a problem if a problem is very complex. The reason why Einstein said you cannot solve a problem while thinking at the level at which you created it. You cannot solve a problem while thinking at the level at which you created the problem. It's thinking. And part of this thinking is systems thinking, is creative thinking, conceptual thinking, is thinking, mathematical thinking. That's all.